And ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Brian Iglesias, the director of the film.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you.
We will have a chance after the discussion, which we'll try to keep brief, for you to see this if you haven't seen it in its entirety. And it's extremely moving, I think, after the premiere that we did at Symphony Space. There were very few dry eyes in the auditorium, and we did have an opportunity to recognize the veterans who were in the audience that night. Brian, amazing job. I guess if I could just ask you first off, could you tell us a little bit about your travels and how this has all developed with an eye toward not only the formation, but what's happened the last 6 months as you've been out and about, and how has it gone?
Okay. Well, first off, thank you all for spending an evening with us in the film. And thank the Korea Society not just for the New York City premiere, which was great and a significant moment in the life of this film, but also for hosting us again tonight. Basically, I'm a Marine. I'm a captain in the Marine Corps Reserves. I'm an infantry officer. I did 13 years active duty. I'm on my 3rd year of reserve duty. I served as an infantry platoon commander, a couple combat tours in Iraq. And our legacy and history is very, very important, not just in the military, but also as in the Marine Corps specifically. I know it's the same for the Korean Marines as well, the Haebyongdae, the ROK Marine Corps, which I've worked with a couple times in the past. So when I got off of active duty, my goal was to pursue a career in filmmaking. I couldn't find a job, so I basically took my career into my own hands, and me and another partner of mine, another Iraq War veteran, we literally cashed out our retirements, we cashed out our life insurance, we got in a van, we traveled around the country. We interviewed, my old college roommate jumped in, so 3 guys in a van, 127 cities and 14 states, interviewed 186 chosen survivors on our own dime, edited on a laptop computer in my spare bedroom. Now, mind you, we went to film school, so we had a bit of technical ability, but we did the DVD packaging, we did everything, the website, you name it, we did it. We released the film, we played at the GI Film Festival, which is a military film festival. We won Best Documentary, we premiered it in Manhattan at Symphony Space with Korea Society. Since then, we've had over probably close to 100 screenings across the country. We call them Forgotten Victory screenings. We sell screening kits online. You can buy them and set up your own screening. And we use that term significantly, the Forgotten Victory screenings. We've had great success. Many people on their own, they set up these screenings with press, news media, they get TV. PepsiCo came on as a national sponsor. Pepsi put us in theaters in New York and LA, so it qualified us for an Academy Award. It qualified us for a Producers Guild Award, put us in theaters. I just got accepted into the Producers Guild, which is a very, very significant event in the life of a filmmaker. Wow. We're in retail sales online. We're in all the Marine Corps exchanges. We're on a couple of mail order catalogs for the Marine Corps. And so the Marine Corps is covered. We're about to branch over into the Army and the Navy exchange system probably early next year. We're in museums across the country. We just played at the Intrepid, the aircraft carrier. They're going to hold us in their gift shop. It's the 2nd most visited museum in New York City. About 5,000 people a day on the aircraft carrier. So we've been doing a lot. We just got back from South Korea. The South Korean government flew out 100 chosen survivors, and the military to put me and Anton Statler's my partner, on orders. So we went in there, we screened the film, and we took part of special, we call it Chosin in Korea. They call it the Jangjin Reservoir. It's a different word. We used Chosin because we were using Japanese maps at the time, and that's what the Japanese called this place, but the Koreans call it the Jangjin Reservoir. They had a big ceremony in South Korea. I went to the ceremony. They used part of the documentary in the ceremony. It was a huge event at the War Museum. And then we went to the Marine Corps Ball. It's a joint ball with the Korean Marines and the U.S. Marines. It was a great time. And they are turning this into a $100 million 3D Korean War action film titled 17 Days of Winter. The company is Mad Media. It's a U.S. and South Korean company. While I was in Korea, I got to meet with them. We've done location scouting already. Our director is Eric Brevig. He did Journey to the Center of the Earth. He just did Yogi Bear. You might see the commercials for that, the animated 3D movie. He's won an Academy Award for special effects directing. And our writer is Frank Pearson. He's an Academy Award-winning writer. He did Cool Hand Luke, Dog Day Afternoon. And more importantly, he is a World War II Army infantry veteran. so he's the best guy to tell the story. And that's kind of it in a whirlwind. I mean, we've done a whole lot, and again, it's just me and my buddy. We have the company. We're doing it all by ourselves. We haven't paid a penny for advertising. We've been on NPR a couple times, USA Today, Business Week, Entrepreneur Magazine, CBS TV News, NBC Nightly News. We've been very, very fortunate to get the response, and we're just happy that we were able to tell the story.
That's fantastic, fantastic. You know, I guess at the beginning here, we should really, I mean, one, thank you for your service in Iraq, and also, you know, thank you for this. I think we all felt that this was a great gift, and those of us who stay through the screening tonight, I'm sure will appreciate that as well. The question is, how do you take this from the experience in Iraq? What was the motivating factor behind this being your topic as you had served the country there? Why Chosin?
It's tough, you know, and I think going into it might have been a different reason. It might have been a subconscious reason. So going into it, we said, well, if we're going to cash out our retirements and tell one story, that's a big risk. You know, I had a new home, I have no job, I have a pregnant wife. And I'm going to say, honey,
Wow.
Guess what? I'm going to ditch my savings in life insurance, and I'm going to go make a movie. There's a few women here. How many wives would love to hear their husband say that? All right? But my wife was great. I've known her since I was 13 years old, and she said, you know, as long as you're not getting shot at, I guess I can live with it. You know, trust is a very special word. And I guess she trusted me. And I did it because if I was going to take that giant risk, it had to be something that AI could do. We can do a documentary on that budget. I mean, it would be difficult, but I couldn't make Avatar on my life insurance and my savings. Being in the military, I don't have $100 million in my retirement account to make an Avatar. So we could do it, and it had to be special. If we're going to put it all on the line for one story, it's got to be a meaningful story. It's got to mean something. Because we had to put a lot of hours, a lot of blood, sweat. I mean, we were sleeping in the van sometimes, sleeping on floors, sleeping on VFWs and American Legions. It was a tough, but again, Marines, we love misery. So that was actually fun for us. You know, we're professionals at being miserable. So, and then I think part of it might have been maybe an exercising of our own experiences, because both myself and Anton, again, being an infantry officer, you know, we were there when it was bad. You know, so sometimes you pick up guys who, you know, they're not all in one piece. You see a lot of things, much like these guys in the Korean War. And these guys are our heroes. I mean, again, when we say we talk about our history and our legacy, you know, these guys are there when we leave on the buses. They're sending us care packages. And they're there when we come home to welcome us back. And we study them. We learn about them. And we look up to them as walking giants. I think being part of that legacy, and, you know, it was probably easier to tell their story from our perspective than to tell our story. Because being, you know, young in the transition phase, you don't talk about your experiences so much. But giving these guys a vehicle to share their experiences might have been a kind of a therapeutic thing for us at the same time, if that makes sense. So it was tough. I mean, you have to imagine, some of this stuff was grueling. Some of you have seen the documentary. For those who haven't, it's pretty gut-wrenching. So imagine doing this 186 times without any sleep, and to hear these amazing, some stories were so emotional, we couldn't even put it on screen. I mean, some of these guys, I would say over half the guys we talked to said they haven't said a word about it in 60 years. Because some of these things, you know, and that's the reason why they talk to us. They wouldn't have talked to us otherwise, because, you know, Jerry Bruckheimer, the famous guy, and a couple other film producers, they've tried to do this. They've tried to make a documentary, make a feature film. It didn't happen. We're not better than them. We're just unique in that we know the darkest places of their souls because we live in the same place. So they can talk to us. You know, you can, if some of you know combat veterans, if you've ever been to combat, you know that you don't say those things to anybody. You know, you can go to a VFW and hear conversations that you won't hear anywhere else. And that's why they talk to us. And a good thing is they've been, as it's been therapeutic for us, they're using this film unofficially in VA hospitals around the country is for not just young kids, because we idolize these guys. So you can lead people by two ways. You can lead by telling them what to do. I can tell you to do something, or I can set the example for you to follow. And these guys are burdening themselves as kind of an example for these young guys to follow. And I think to me, so far, the biggest group that's been impacted, the Vietnam vets. And I think because the Vietnam vets were trained by these guys who stayed in and trained the Vietnam vets. And those guys did not have a vehicle for unburdening themselves. They came back to to turmoil in the country. And a good example I use all the time is in Houston. A Chosin vet that's in the movie, he's in Houston, the VA hospital. It's one of the largest VA hospitals in the world, in the country. And he said that these Vietnam vets would show up. You have to go to PTSD counseling every week. And they said they would show up, they'd keep their mouth shut, and they'd leave. They wouldn't say anything. You don't have to say anything. You just have to go to the meetings. And he said once they showed the film, you couldn't shut them up. And I think that's because they give us a license to talk about our experiences. And halfway through this year, we had record number of suicides in the military. This might not be the answer, but if it helps, if it can save a life, if it can save a marriage, a friendship, a family, that's a great additional benefit that we're more than happy to do that. And since $1, we've also been donating a portion of the proceeds to the Wounded Warrior Project and the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund, because it's the right thing to do, and it keeps these guys, their legacy alive. So, I think it's just therapeutic, I think, across the board for us to do this sort of thing, and I think this helped us in our transition.
The day after Thanksgiving, this last Friday, National Public Radio played in the afternoon an interview, actually, on All Things Considered that had been taped earlier on the Wounded Warrior Project. One of the questions that was asked in that context by the host out of Philadelphia was, what does history or what do the years allow people to say? Because the example that was given was, now we're dealing with so much post-traumatic stress syndrome with Afghanistan and Iraqi veterans and Iraq veterans, and it seems that only now the Vietnam generation has sort of come forward. The question is, why is there this disparity? And the answer was interesting. I'd love to know your thought on this, which was that the more that the time passes, it provides a different prism, or it provides a different lens. What did you find in terms of these veterans and their look back? I mean, what does time allow them to do in terms of evaluating their role in this historic endeavor?
It's tough. I think for the Vietnam guys, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not a doctor by any means. I have a film degree. Okay, so I'm a film degree and I'm an infantry officer. I'm not really qualified for anything. But I think for the Vietnam guys, the reason why they're coming forward is because there is an open dialogue to do that. If you were a Vietnam vet and you came back and you were spit upon or cursed at, you're not going to tell your story to anybody. God forbid you tell anybody the horrors that you saw in fear of what reaction you would get. I mean, you got to think, when it's unnatural, and we teach this in the Marine Corps, it's unnatural to take another person's life in America. For our society, it's unnatural to do that. For any civilized society, whether it's in self-defense or not, it's an unnatural act to take somebody's life. And when you come home, it's really tough to process that, to say, I did this. I took a life. Whether any religion, it's wrong to do, right? Thou shalt not kill or murder. We teach that way, We don't even harm animals. I mean, that's our culture. And to come home and to process this in your head, it's very, very difficult. And then to get yelled at calling you a baby killer and a murderer. Now when World War II guys came back, they were championed. You're heroes. So they came back and said, I had to live through this painful experience, but they're reinforcing what I did as a right thing to do. So I did the right thing. So when they're in their rooms alone at night and they're thinking about what they did, they have some sort of positive reinforcement. The Vietnam vet comes home and says, I didn't have a choice. I went to this country and I did these things and went through this horrible experience, and now I'm a monster. So that's a negative reinforcement. They can't process that. That can only tear you up inside. So, and I think that because now we've changed as a society, that we understand and we kind of welcome the veterans home, and we also welcome their injuries. You got to think all the kids with, I'm service disabled, I have a metal plate in my neck, I have nerve damage in my arm. So many guys are coming back injured and wounded, that our country as a whole has done a much better job of recognizing that and embracing them and taking care of them. And I think that has allowed the Vietnam veteran to open up. It's just sad it took so long to do that. For the older guys, for the Korean War veterans, I think the reason why they're opening up is for two reasons. One, someone asked them. We went around on our own dime, and we asked them to tell their story. They were more often than not surprised that we were doing it. They don't see themselves as heroes. We do. And then on top of that, because they're getting old and they're dying. It hasn't even been 2 years yet, and we've lost 3 of the guys that we interviewed. And that's that we know of. There may have been more that have passed away. Some of these guys are on their deathbed. And it's just been so long that for some of these guys, they just got to get it out before they go. And I think that's important. And now that there are services for them to do that, they can go to the VA. So now if you go to a VA hospital for PTSD counseling, or PTS, it's really post-traumatic stress. Everyone who's been in intense combat, just because you go to Iraq doesn't mean you have post-traumatic stress. But if you've been in intense combat, you'll have post-traumatic stress, just like everyone surrounding 9/11. But a disorder means you can't function during the day. Post-traumatic stress, I think everyone has it that's been in combat. But again, I think because the dialogue is open, you can go to a VA hospital, I think it's like every Friday, and there's World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, everyone's there. And the best thing about that is if you closed your eyes, you couldn't tell anyone apart. It's the same guy. They're all going back to when they were 18, 20 years old, scared out of their mind, doing what they had to do for their country. And every story is the same. And the same thing with the Korean Marines. We know Korean Marines. We talk to the Korean Marines and the Korean soldiers. And so the idea of your combat experience transcends not just age, but it transcends country. I can talk to an old Korean Marine from Vietnam or any other war, and he's going to tell me the same exact things that he thinks about, he goes through, than I am. We don't even have to speak the same language. It's the same soul, if that makes sense.
One of the things, Brian, that struck me that you've mentioned before is how in all of these interviews that were, as I think you said, close to 200, 180 some odd, right, that people tended not to talk about themselves, but to talk about where they were or their fellows in battle and what acts of heroism they saw in those with whom they served, which was remarkable.
It's true, and I think that's kind of commonplace. I think a general rule we say, if you hear a guy talking about all the things that he did, it probably didn't happen. Yeah, you saw too many movies, or you just trying to aggrandize yourself. All the guys that we interviewed, they always talked about their buddies. That was the biggest thing. It's like talking about their experiences, their boss, their CO, their buddy, and what happened. Maybe it's because they're just watching other people. They're not really watching themselves. Maybe because just being in the military, you're in and of itself, you're selfless. You live a life of purpose, being part of something bigger than yourself. And again, especially the guys that you lose, you remember those guys the most because you didn't get the chance to come home and drink beers with them or grow old with them. You didn't get that chance, so they're kind of stuck in your memory. And then I think it's tough to remember. I mean, I was in Iraq twice, and they were doozies. The second one was pretty rough, and I can't really remember anything, to be honest with you. Not that I try and remember, but I have my Marines and my guys tell me stuff that I did. I don't remember any of it. I have a Bronze Star Award citation. I don't even know if that happened or not. I can't really remember. As they tell me I remember. I don't know, I think it might be part of just your brain as a coping mechanism, kind of hides things for you on purpose. Maybe some coping mechanisms work better than others in certain people. That's why some people have certain trouble. But I can tell you what I do remember. I remember all my kids, where they were, who got hurt where and how and when, who picked them up. I can remember all that.
Interesting.
But I can't really remember anything that I did.
Interesting. Let me ask you about 3 of the individuals, and then we'll open it up a bit. One is the person who captures our attention because of the fact that he's without hands, and if I seem to recall, I think he has lost his limbs below the knee, right? And your story about what happened when you went to meet him and you looked up a long staircase. I wonder if you could recall that for us.
Sure. His name is John Redinger, if I'm saying that correctly. He's in the film. He's missing his hands and his legs, and we were in Texas, and then we were in a Marine Corps building, a reserve building, and we're on the second floor because that's where they let us shoot. And then I forgot he was coming in next. We were interviewing a lot of veterans that day, and I remembered, oh, he doesn't have hands or legs. How's he going to get upstairs? So we started breaking down our equipment to move to a location downstairs. There's no elevator. And then as we were getting our gear, we're taking down the lights. We look at the door, and he's standing there. He climbed the stairs, and he just have enough of his thumb to kind of wedge a stick cane in there, and he walked on like peg legs. You know, they weren't like advanced prosthetics. He had like these little older prosthetics. And we were surprised, and we told him how surprised we were, but then he told us that every Tuesday you can find him at Brooke Army Medical Hospital mentoring young veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan missing limbs. You know, so you think a guy who could grow old and being bitter about not just what he saw his friends go through, but to lose a limb, to lose everything. So for the last 60 years, he hasn't touched a thing. We take that for granted, feeling a hot coffee, grabbing an ice cold drink, you know, holding your children in your hands, walking, having your tired feet, you know, putting on warm socks in the wintertime. He hasn't had that. You think you could be bitter. He raised a family, had him and his wife started a cabinet making business, and he spent his time mentoring young men and women so they're not bitter and they can continue to live their life. Now it's just remarkable that, again, that the life of service doesn't stop even though there's a traumatic experience and a traumatic injury, that they're still connected to their service beyond. That was kind of an eye-opening moment for us.
I think a second one that grabs a lot of us who've seen the film is the fellow who talks about having to have used people around him to bunker in and create a barrier. And how do you get somebody to talk about that personal and experience? What was he like?
Well, it's tough. A lot of guys did talk about that. They used a lot of Chinese bodies or sometimes, unfortunately, American bodies because what happened, it was so cold they couldn't dig. Now, we didn't put a lot of that in the film because we didn't want to kind of make it bigger. I don't know. We didn't want to capitalize on the horror. But it's mentioned, but you couldn't dig. And in the military, if you can't dig, you have to build up. You have to protect yourself. And because it's 20 to 40 degrees below zero, and when these guys would die, they would freeze. That's a barrier. They would build parapets, and build walls of frozen bodies to protect themselves because you couldn't dig. It was physically impossible to dig. Only the units that had dynamite that could blow holes in the ground had actually holes. Everyone else had to build up. Some guys talked about it. The story that you'll see in the film was very, very personal to him, and I think he told us because it's a way of exercising it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to think of using a buddy as a barrier, using his body. Normally you would protect the body, you would wrap him up, or you would do something to use it. But that's how dire and how extreme the situation was for a lot of these guys. And there were plenty of Koreans there too. There were Korean military units that were there, Army units, Korean military police units, Korean translators. I mean, we were side by side. They experienced the same thing. And I think that just to get them to open up, a lot of times I would just sit there and we would talk, we would get friendly, we would share war stories. Then I would just say, tell me about Chosin, and they just went. And some of the things were surprising, and that came out of nowhere. And the whole story of that was just remarkable.
And maybe the last person I'd ask you about, who basically said that he hadn't talked about it, and all this time, and it was only once he was asked to get up and do a public talk just a few years back, and if I remember the line or approximate it, he started to cry then, and he hasn't stopped.
Yeah, it's a process, coming home and trying to do the transition, and every guy and girl they process it differently. And I think when you don't talk about it for so long, we kind of came up with this saying by doing this experience that if you, we use the word crying, and a lot of times in American culture, it's like a bad thing for a guy to cry or to unburden themselves. But the idea is that when it's painful, when there's a need for it, if you don't cry on the outside, you're just crying on the inside, and there's nowhere for the tears to go, and you're just going to drown your soul. I think for those guys who can do that, and he did that, and it just came by he had to give a speech about his experience in Korea, but again, no one asked him to talk about it. So he didn't get up in front of the crowd and start crying. He was home trying to write his speech, and that caused him to remember. So some people can compartmentalize to put those emotions and put those experiences away, and they don't look at them anymore. They're just gone and they're locked away somewhere. But if somebody opens the door, they come out. And sometimes they come out stronger than they went in. And I think that was the experience for him and for a lot of guys the guys that again, they said they'd never talked about it. And the emotional reaction, sometimes we hired other disabled vets to work on our crew at different areas of the country. Whenever we could hire them, we would. But there were times that everybody walked out. They couldn't handle it. It was just me and the guy because they just left the cameras running and walked out. It was so emotional. Because the first time they talk about these things, they can't keep it together. But the nice thing is at the end of the shoot, we're hugging, we're talking, maybe we'll catch a beer, and they're saying thank you. Like, thank you for coming out here and telling my story, because we didn't have to. We did it because we love these guys. They're our heroes. We idolize them. And they were appreciative of not just us wanting to tell their story, but because we gave them a vehicle to unburden themselves. For some of these guys, before they pass away, which is, sure. And I get a lot of stuff from kids, family members. That's probably been the biggest reward. Is I have so many family members talk about like their dad being in the Korean War and never talking about it, and Dad was kind of weird. I have two good examples. One was I got an email, and this woman was telling her father would take him skiing. Every winter, they would go up and they would go skiing, but he wouldn't get out of the car because of the snow and the mountains, what it reminded him of. So he would drive them to the skiing. The kids would go skiing, but he would wait in the car until they were done, and they would drive them home. She never knew why, because he would never tell him why. But now she knows. He's passed away, but that gives the children closure, even without their fathers being there. Another kid was great. This was recently. We played at the New Jersey Film Festival, and he said that, growing up, his father, his room was right next door to his father's room, and he'd hear his father screaming throughout the night with nightmares. And he never knew why. His dad never talked about it, and he passed away a few months before the screening, and he said, now he knows. And that brought him closer to his father, that we could do that and provide that for this son who now, even after his father's passing, feels closer to his father. Wow. It's just a remarkable journey that we're all on. I mean, everyone who watches this film and kind of is connected to the Korean War, or any kind of military combat experience, it's kind of a journey that we all can take with the film.
Just lastly, I think we here at the Korea Society were very impressed with your inclusion in the clip here, and you see it in the film a little more fully, with the fact that they take ownership, the veterans take ownership of the modern Korea we have today, and they feel a pride and a very direct linkage to what has become the modern economic miracle and a place of tremendously high living standard that's a democratic harbinger for others in Asia. I think that's a really very powerful message to take home for those of us who are interested in the Korea-United States relationship.
And you're right, and I think it is important. I mean, if you don't know the figures, they're right about where after the Korean War, Korea was the second worst economy in the world. And in 60 years, they're just about to be the 10th largest economy in the world. They're the only country that was a UN recipient who's become a UN donor. I mean, Korea is like the miracle country. And I think that it's because of their experiences, and their personal cost for freedom, and what they did with that gift. And I think that's why, for us, our experiences with Korea and the Koreans are that it's important for them to make sure that their kids do not forget those lessons, because they've come so far, I think, because of what they went through. And that because their children didn't go through that at the same time, that they're afraid that those lessons might be lost. But it just, Korea is a miracle. It's been a great partner, both economically and the military. I've trained with the Korean Marines. It's just great. I mean, I think that they've been super, super supportive of the Korean veterans. And there's no other country that really does that. I mean, you got to think about it. And I think that even if these guys don't feel remembered, at the end of the day, and for all these guys, they say, at least when it's all said and done, South Korea is free, and it's wonderful, and it's because of our sacrifice. There's a reward. There's a direct reward that quantifies the sacrifice that they and their buddies made. And if you look at the spectrum of wars, not everyone can say that. Vietnam. Vietnam is not an economic powerhouse. They're not, free and clear. It's tough. Like, what's my reward as a Vietnam vet? What's my reward as an Iraq vet? We didn't all come home. We didn't all come home in one piece. What's my reward? What am I going to say when I'm 80 years old? Is Iraq successful? Was it worth it? I can't tell you if it's worth it now. I can only look down the future and see what the end product of time, because freedom doesn't happen overnight. Success isn't overnight. The same thing with Afghanistan. When you lose your buddies, it's kind of hard to process that without seeing a direct, positive result of that sacrifice. And that, at least, if nothing else, no films, no other gratitude is shown, they can at least say that Korea made it, and they did it. And that's just a very, very remarkable thing.
Great. Has anyone seen the film that would like to ask a question? Or even if not? Yes, sir, please.
I'd like to ask you how you came, Brian, coming from Iraq as you did, what made you remember the forgotten war?
Well, for us in the Marine Corps, and I would say across the spectrum of the militaries, but the one thing that ties us all together is our history and our legacy and our culture. And so in boot camp, we were taught about the Korean War. And I went to enlisted boot camp, and I loved it so much that I went to officer boot camp. That's how much I hate myself. I abused my body and more than once, but they teach us that, and it's so important. And then we have special ceremonies, and during the Marine Corps, we celebrate the Marine Corps birthday. We talk about the different battles, and we have our own magazines, our own literature, and books that we're required to read. We make each other read these books and learn our history and cherish it. So we knew it. The world didn't know it, but it was important to us. So it was a natural fit for us to do it because it hasn't been done.
Absolutely, it's been forgotten.
Yes, sir. So and again, and we're happy to be the ones to do it. Really, it's a gift to us, really.
Will the 17 days film be made in 3D?
It will be a 3D.
Well,
It'll be in 3D, absolutely. It's going to be big. It's at least $100 million now, and I could see it climbing. So, but we're doing it. Yeah, it's great. Pretty soon I'll get rid of my 15-year-old pickup truck. So we'll see.
certainly, it's a labor of love. I did want to say just before we begin to roll the screening that we're very grateful for Yuni Cho, who is our director of film here. And just to let you know, Yuni has just come back from the Busan International Film Festival. We had a film series over at MoMA, which some of you may have joined us at. It was 8 days of film at the Museum of Modern Art with the Korea Society. If you would have asked me before how many would show up over that time, I think I would have guessed 600, maybe 700. We had 3,493 people come for Korean film. And the following weekend, when she showed those films at BAM, we had another 480. So it's been just a tremendous turnout. And we're very proud that we were able to include one documentary of anything we did in 2010, and that was Brian's. And we're very proud that it focuses on the subject that it does. And I'm hoping that we get to do more with Brian in 2011. Yuni has up for offer to begin the new year on January 23rd, a special screening of the film Poetry, which is the first Korean film to have taken the screenwriting award at Cannes this year. And that will be just across the bridge at the Museum of the Moving Image. So if you'd like to check our website at koreasociety.org or speak to Yuni after, she can tell you how you can get there. But we're hoping to draw a big crowd. That is going to reopen. That facility reopens on January 15th after a $67 million renovation. So it is very much state-of-the-art and a tremendous thing. And if they ask us which documentaries they should show, we're very quick to recommend yours, Brian. So thank you very much for your time here. And one quick question, and then we'll go straight to the film.
Did I understand correctly that the name of the gentleman who lost the hands and legs, is he John Parkinson? What is
John Parkinson's in the movie. He has the blue jacket. He has a bald head, but John Redinger. Redinger.
You know, since I saw this movie in June, was it June in Space Theater? That CD has been in my CD player tray every day. I wake up with that, and I sleep with it, and I've been doing just entire. In fact, I put certain segment on pause and took a picture with my camera, and I printed out just to figure out. And John, the gentleman with the blue jacket, who
That's John
was
Parkinson.
praying for
He's praying.
one more day.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
He's a John
Parkinson.
Okay. And what's the other gentleman's name?
His last name is Redinger.
Redinger.
It's kind of spelled weird, like R-I-E-D.
Warner Redinger.
I can look at it and I can.
You know, I printed out this is a Warner Redinger.
Robert.
Warner
Thank you.
Redinger. Okay.
And so we should point out, please, if you do have the chance to obtain a copy of the DVD, the packaging's lovely. There's some original art there, and you'll see the production value of what you see tonight is just of extraordinary quality. You're being far too humble to play down your very, very pronounced gifts.
Thank you.
They're really wonderful.
And that's at frozenchosen.com. You can get it online. And that's CHOSIN, of course, frozenchosen.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
Quick question. And also, I see two more names at the bottom of the list. One is William Kelly, and the last one is Robert Lurney. I would like to know who is Robert Lurney, and is William Kelly has anything to do with Robert Kelly?
He doesn't, but Bob Lunny's a member of the Korea Society.
Great.
Who?
Bob Lunny, Robert Lunny.
I see. He's in the movie?
He is. I'll tell you. I'll be here afterwards, too.
And if you're not a member, we have membership material outside.
All right. And William Kelly, is he related to Robert Kelly? He was a runner for Joseph Owen, Lieutenant Joseph.
I don't think so, no.
No, it's
he's
just
not.
another Kelly.
Mhm.
Okay. And who is William Kelly in the movie?
He has a yellow shirt. He's at the end talking about getting on the ship, and there's not a lot of people left in his unit.
And speaking of getting on the ship, it's not in the trailer, but it is very pronounced in the film. Over 1 million descendants today of those who were rescued on that ship.
In the movie, who's Robert Lurney?
He's in a blue shirt and a tie. He talks about getting the people on ship, the refugees on ship.
Oh, at the end of the movie.
Yes, ma'am.
I see. Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Well, thank you. And thank you again to Yuni. Thanks to Peter in our sound booth who's handling the video tonight as well. And Brian, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Really looking forward to the screening here now.
Thank you.